Photoshop is a really great tool for focusing on the little details of your designs. Let's hop in and look at some examples of this project that can teach us a few things. Let's take a look at some examples from this assignment. I think this one did a great job of staying on brand. And if we take a look at the style frame layout, it also followed this pretty exactly without feeling too much like they just line it up like as if this was put on the canvas and then they put the elements on there. I think they took some creative freedom, like playing around with the placement of the head. I think that was a really good layout for just cropping off the bottom of the head so we just see the top half. It's not really focused on the person, it's putting the focus on the head. I think that was a really smart decision. Using these different colors that were within the brand, from the greens and the purples, I think worked great. And the way that this designer layered different brushstrokes on top of each other at different opacities really makes it feel like it was actually glowing. I think that's a really, really great decision. And then this text over here is laid out very nice and justified on the left side. One issue that I have with it is the color that this designer chose for this text. They used the gray color that was in the color palette of the brand guide, which is totally acceptable. It's something that you would probably think to do, but because the actual color of the logo is white, this text logo down here, it might not be 100% white. Let's take a look. Actually, yes, it is. It is 100% white there. The shadow on the inside of the logo, I think, is what that darker color came from. So this brand guide was probably just a little bit incomplete, which sometimes actually can happen in the real world. And the reason why I have an issue with this being the gray color instead of white is because it's naturally less apparent than the logo down here. This bright white is drawing my eye in more, and since this is kind of the statement of the ad, I want to see that pop off the background. So I would just select this text, fill it with white by eyedropper, using the eyedropper on that text, and then filling this layer by pressing Command Backspace. That will fill with the background color, I believe. Yeah, so I actually should have pressed Command or Option Delete. Option or Alt will fill with the foreground. So eyedropper, click Option or Alt, and then delete with that layer selected, and now that's white. And I think that is just a better contrast than we have right here. So just that little change from the gray that's a little bit less apparent, more muted, and giving it more contrast with the background by making it bright and bold. Otherwise, though, I think this is just a really successful translation of the creative director's guidance from that style frame layout, and really, really love the way that this was interpreted with that glow. So nice job there. This second example is a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed this style frame. I think the designer just took some really great design decisions, some good risks that paid off. I really love the way that the type has been treated up here, even though it doesn't really line up exactly the way that the creative director had probably envisioned. I think it's really fun and gives a really distinct personality to the brand. I also love all of these hand-drawn elements that have been put in here. The swirls around the can make it feel a lot more 3D. The way the can is just slightly angled off to the side kind of goes with the slanted text. It's all working really great together. Now, I do want to say one thing about a style frame like this that is very different from the creative director's direction, and that is to give the creative director options. Include this as basically a second option that you're submitting. This would be the option that you would say, I made some kind of bold design decisions that I think are going to help this style frame match the brand a little bit more and make it a little bit more fun, but also here's a more literal translation of the style frame guide that you gave me, just so you have that in case that's really what you wanted to see. But that way you're not taking too many liberties. You can show them that you are listening to them and you're giving them what they want, give them that literal translation of what they're asking for, but then also show the creative director that you have some design skills and some thoughts and input into what this could actually look like. Now, a few things that I would change on this is I think the head, Joey's head over here, is taking up a little bit too much real estate. That is the first thing that you see, and it's taking up half of the entire frame. I would think that scaling that down a little bit would help. So let's just try that. I'm going to scale his head down. So Command T to transform and scale it down. Doesn't have to be a lot, just a little bit smaller there. And then we need to bring down these marks. Now, it looks like all of these were drawn on the same layer. and they were separated by color. Nothing wrong with that at all. I just want to separate them out quickly. So I pressed L to switch to my lasso tool, and I'm going to draw a selection around those lines. I'll start with the white, and I'll press Command X to cut and Command Shift V to paste, and I'll call this my white glow. Then I'll select my green layer, lasso tool again, L on the keyboard, draw a selection around those green marks, Command X to cut, Command Shift V to paste in place, and I'll call that green glow. Then I'll move that up, group those together, call it glow, and then I'll just move them down so they're right on top of the head again. So there you go, and maybe they need to be scaled down just a little bit. Before I scale down anything, I'm going to convert it to a smart object, and that way those lines are preserved, the resolution of those lines. And there we go. Now that takes up a little bit less space. These angled lines of the text are actually kind of leading you to looking at Joey's head, and I think that just makes it all feel a little bit more balanced. Another thing I would do is this line swirling around the can right here. I love the shape of it, but it needs to move down because it is covering up this text. So all we need to do to fix this is make sure we're on the right layer. There we go. I'll make my lasso selection around that, and then hold down Command while clicking and dragging, and this is going to cut and reposition without having to remove this line from that layer. It's literally just grabbing those pixels and moving them down. Now that it's not on top of that text, I'll press Command D to deselect, and there you go. Now those swirls, I think, are lined up a little bit better. Everything else about this frame I really love, and like I said, I would just make a second version that is a more literal translation of the style frame guide that you got from the creative director. So let's move on to this third example, which I think is doing a really good job of interpreting pretty much exactly what the style frame layout guide was suggesting you do. So we've got the head on the lower left side, we've got these glow streaks coming out from the top, the nice big bold text laid up on top on this section, our logo, and our can. Now it looks like the text logo should be a little bit smaller, so I'm just going to make some minor adjustments here, and we're going to try and make this the most literal translation of that style frame guide. So I'm going to make the can a little bit bigger, move that over a little bit, and grab both of these actually, move them over a little, and maybe line up the left of this text with the left of that logo text. Then it looks like, yeah, all of this is actually pretty squared off. So I'm going to scale down this text a little bit so it's lined up on both edges. And something that I really liked about this version is that the designer chose to make this text all caps. And I know that in the branding guide, that text was written out in proper case with the first letter of each word being capitalized, but I think that was a really nice design decision, and it would probably make this block of text just feel a lot more solid. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on this version. I'm going to grab that text, and I want to find my all caps, which is not showing up at the properties panel, so I'm going to open up the character panel, which is right here, window character, and then I can click on this button right here to make my text all caps. All right, then I'm going to make that white just like I did with the other style frame, so I'm going to make that white so it stands out, and because it's bigger now because of the all caps, I need to scale it down one more time to square that up with the sides of the logos. Somewhere about there. And then I think I'm going to grab all three of these elements and just scale them all down a tad. Not too much, just something like that, and tap it over. And then I did really like how the head was cropped off on this version of the style frame. So I think I'm going to mimic that and just bring this head down a little bit. And that kind of looks like it's pretty much what the creative director was envisioning here. And I think these streaks for the glow are great. They're just a little too thin. Right now they look like almost like steam to me, and I don't think that's what we want to communicate here. Instead, the creative director wanted it to be a hand-sketched glow, and the sketch on this paper was just these straight lines, but I had this idea of, instead of just using textured lines, what if I tried to make it look like shaving cream? And not literally shaving cream, but some kind of textured brush that kind of simulates shaving cream. So what I'm going to do is hide this layer and make a new one, and I'll call this shaving cream glow. And then I'm going to look for a brush that might look something like shaving cream. So let's go into our brushes right here. And I think I'm going to probably look for something like paint. I would imagine it'd be under the paint that would be more wet and look a little bit more like shaving cream. And I'm kind of just looking at thumbnails, looking at the names until I see something that might look a little bit like shaving cream. Looks like, oh, this one might be interesting. Creamy. You know, shaving cream, it's creamy. Let's try that one. I'll grab that. Look how big that is. That looks pretty good. And I'll just, oh yeah. That absolutely looks like I kind of just brushed on shaving cream. So I think that's going to work perfectly. Maybe mess with the flow a little bit since I'm using my mouse. Oh yeah, I love the way that brings the texture on. Okay, so let me clear this layer out, and then I'll maybe make this a little bit smaller and just kind of brush this out one at a time. And just kind of undo with Command Z until I'm happy with the way that this is looking. And obviously I'd be making much better strokes if I was using my Wacom, so why don't I just grab that so you can see the difference between this and what the Wacom can actually do. Okay, I've got my Wacom. I'm going to, I'll just hide this layer for now, make a new one, and then this time I'm going to use my Wacom, get my microphone out of the way here, and brush these strokes on, and that's going to look a lot more natural. So I think I can make my brush bigger again. Let me just get back to the default size and flow. There we go. And again, my hand is just on Command Z so that I can undo as much as I want and just keep painting these until I'm happy with the way that they look. So that's probably too much, so I'm just going to delete it and try one more time. I'm going to do a small one, do maybe a bigger one. Let's see, maybe give it some variance. I don't know. Just playing around and seeing what it looks like until I get something that I like. Pretty sure I want all of these to be pretty uniform, starting at the base and going out. Maybe do a fat one right there, a little one. Something like that. All right, now I just want to move this one down. I don't like how high that one went, so I'm just going to lasso tool around it. Command drag it down, something like that, and there we go. Now we've got this kind of glow that is sort of looking like shaving cream, which goes along with the product, and I think this is a really good start for a literal style frame interpretation. Now there is this one note of maybe some texture in the background. There are, you know, hundreds of brushes that we could go through to kind of find a texture. So why don't we just grab one real quick, like looking under maybe effects box, and then see if we can find something interesting. Add canvas. That sounds interesting. Let's make a new layer. I'll put this on the bottom, and I want it to be a light version of this purple. So I know this is in the brand guide, but I don't have it up right now. So just to speed this along, I'm gonna make this a little bit brighter. Something like that, and then just paint on the background. Looks like I accidentally touched already, so let me undo that. Make sure I'm actually on a new layer. There we go, and then I'm just gonna brush. There we go, just like that. And I've got this kind of canvas texture. So it gives it a little bit of grit, a little bit of texture to the background, makes it a little bit more interesting. But I think this would be a great first option as a literal translation of this style frame guide. Then you could go on to something like this where you're making some bolder design decisions and having more fun and playing around with the brand style a little bit. But hopefully that gave you some insight into the way that I think about the elements and how to interpret them from a style frame guide like this. It's important to think about what your creative director is hoping to see, that you're actually delivering their expectations, but then also showing them that you have your own voice as a designer when it comes to actually making these.
Boom! Episode 2 is a wrap. Next week is catch-up week, so the dojo will be taking a short break and starting back up when week 3 of class kicks in. I hope you're having fun, I hope you're learning, and I hope you're excited to see what's coming next. See you next time.